What's good, people of God? It's your boy, Minister Maurice Barnes, aka Minister Mo, aka Young Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane. I'm your host for Church in the Streets, and tonight I want to ask a question to everybody. You know, Capital One has a commercial where they ask you, what's in your wallet? Well, the question for tonight is, what's in your house? When I say that, I ask because we all have gifts and talents that was given to us by God. We all have a level of genius in something. And the key is finding out what your genius is and then maximizing it for the kingdom. Because when you do, God's going to magnify you even more. Y'all know I had to comb through the scriptures to find examples of what I'm talking about, right? So tonight we're going to walk over to 2 Kings chapter 4, first through the 7 verses. I'll be reading from the NIV, you know what I'm saying, because I like the translation. So starting at verse 1 in chapter 4, 2 Kings. The wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord, but now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves." Elisha replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" "Your servant has nothing there at all," she said, "except a small jar of olive oil." Elisha said, "Go around and ask your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside, shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour out into all the jars, and as each jar is filled, put it to the side." She left them and shut the door behind her, and her sons, they brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another one." But he replied, "There is not a jar left." Then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil, pay your debt. You and your sons can live on what is left." See, in Elisha's fourth chapter, in his fourth chapter of 2 Kings, first through the seventh verse, Elisha's miracles were acts of real charity. He did what Christ did, not only in great wonders, but these were also huge favors to the people who he performed them for. God magnifies his goodness with his power. Elisha readily received the poor widow's complaint because her husband was one of his ministers. So he knew that he was a good steward of his resources. He knew he wasn't just dwindling and spending what God gave him. Sometimes, though, as men of God, we don't plan for our debt. And when God calls us, it leaves our families left to pay debts and try to settle our affairs and all that. It is the duty of all who profess to follow the Lord. While we trust God to provide for us our daily bread, we also must be good stewards of what he blesses us with. Y'all remember that episode. We don't need to go deeper in debt or keep going deeper and deeper in the hole. See, nothing seems to be a bigger black eye to the kingdom than men of God who leave their families in distress after their death because of their opulence and carelessness with the things of the kingdom God entrusted them with. See, Elisha put the widow in a position to pay her debt and to maintain herself and her family. This was done by a miracle, but as to show what is the best method to assist those who are in distress, which is to help them improve their own lives by whatever they have in their house, by whatever they have in them. See, the oil, it was sent by a miracle, but it continued to flow as long as she had empty vessels to receive it. We're never lacking in God or in the riches of his grace. And all our barriers are in ourselves. It's our faith that fails, not God's promise. See, he gives us more than we ask. Where there are more vessels, there is enough in God to fill them, enough for all, enough for each and every one of the Redeemer's all self-sufficiency will only stop from the supply of the wants of the sinners and saving their souls when nobody else applied to him for salvation. Well, this means he's always going to be pouring out, and he's always going to use us to pour out. The widow must pay her debt with the money she received for the oil. Though her creditors were too hard for her, yet they must be paid. Even before she made any provisions for herself or her children, she had to pay her debt. She had to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. It is one of the main laws of the time that we pay every just debt and give everybody his own. Though we leave a little bit for ourselves left over, it's not of constraint, but it's for conscience sake. So who can have an honest mind and with pleasure eat their daily bread if they did something wrong to get it? And if it ain't your own bread, why you eating it? Man, that don't work. Don't eat. You got to till the ground with your hands. That's what's charged with us. That's what was charged with Adam in Genesis. You know what I'm saying? She and her children could live on the rest. And upon the money that she received for the oil, which after they paid, They had to find a way to make an honest livelihood. See, we cannot expect miracles all the time. But if we wait on God and seek his face, not his hand, he'll let the windows of heaven open up and pour us out a blessing that we won't have room enough to receive. But let the widows in particular depend on God. He that has all hearts in his hand can, without a miracle, send us an effectual supply that's sustaining, that's always enough, and that never ends. You know what I'm saying? As individuals, when we look at the story of the widow in the oil, when we look at her situation, when we see what's really going on with her, we should take away the fact that Elijah was a man who had a heart for serving other people, whether they were poor or whether they had money. He ministered to the people based on how they might promote him, based on how they might provide for him, based on if they're going to go to social media and post about it, based on if they're going to take a selfie with him. He was only concerned that people might know and experience God's grace and power in their life. So how available am I to do the same thing? That's the question that we should be asking ourselves. Like the poor widow, we all have certain needs, be it spiritual, emotional, or physical, but God knows these needs completely, and he cares about them personally. Our most fundamental need is to come to him in faith, but with empty vessels that he might multiply our lives according to his purposes. See, while trusting him to meet our needs and never our greed, trusting him to meet our need and never our greed, let us come not with just a few vessels. Let us come with as many vessels as we can. In other words, let's not limit our loving and gracious God by our lack of faith and obedience to him. He's the one who is able to do super abundantly above all we ask and think. But he's promised to do, as the psalmist said, in due season and his own timing, according to his perfect understanding. And we all know his thoughts are way above our thoughts because his ways are not our ways. Too commonly, we want to make God like us, as opposed to seeing God for the wonderful majesty that he is. You know what I'm saying? As a body of believers, as a church, the thing that we need to be taken away from this is very, very, very influential and is very, very impactful. You know what I'm saying? Local bodies of believers have many needs. Same thing, spiritual, physical, emotional, large and small. We live in a world which basically antagonizes the work of God. But the problem we face is not in God's supply of the oil or in the people's ability to meet the needs. The real problem lies in our faith, in our obedience and our submission corporately and individually. As a body and as individuals, we got to get this thing right. Please note the emphasis here. As earthen vessels, we must empty out ourselves of wrong material, wrong attitudes, wrong priorities, wrong pursuits, wrong goals, and present ourselves as vessels of God to be filled, controlled by his word and by his spirit. See, if our lives are cluttered with bad mental attitudes, with grumbling, with selfishness, preoccupation with the things of the world, there's no indifference to God's word. God may stop the supply of oil in your life. He may stop flowing what has once and has always flowed in your life if your obedience ain't right, if your walk ain't right, if you're not doing what he's telling you to do. And the reason the supply stopped is that believers stopped coming to him. Carnal believers did not seek the cause of God and the supply of God. They're too caught up with their own world. I believe this must begin with an evaluation of our own stewardship of giving, believing God that our giving will not be our lack. We're giving from our abundance because what we make happen for others, God makes happen for us. It's simple. I don't know why we overcomplicate it, why we make it super, super hard. Like Lauryn Hill said, it could all be so simple, but we'd rather make it hard. You know, we must first take the oil we have, trust God to multiply, and then as the Lord supplies, not only pay our debts and expenses, but give unto the Lord a return on his investment in us. Remember, the oil was a very valuable commodity and stands for the valuable resources God has given us, whether it be talents, whether it be spiritual gifts, whether it be physical abilities, whether it be financial blessings or whatever. Let us not limit God. Let's believe God. Let's bring the empty vessels and let's not bring just a few. See, what we don't really understand when we just read this, that's why Bishop Valentine tells us we don't have to read the Bible. We got to read the Bible. The thing that we need to see is that this particular widow, the historians, the theologians, they said this is Obadiah's wife and his widow. See, the sons that were with her were his children. The debt that was left didn't come because her husband misused or abused the blessings that were given to them, yet because he would often use his wealth to support the prophet and the ministry. This is why Elisha asked her what she had in her house. See, there was a need in the community, and what she had in her home was just what they needed: oil. Is there something that God is continually allowing you to see or be confronted with? Maybe he's showing you a need so that you can be the answer. And as a result, you can pay your own debts and live off the rest. It's so very vital that we pay what we owe, because as people of God, how can we represent an all supplying God and then turn around and look like we're in lack or we're in desperate need ourselves? Now, when the miracle was performed, the widow could have went and balled out with the money. She could have done something other than what she was supposed to do with it, what he instructed her to do with it. She could have taken the money, left town. Y'all know how we do when the money comes. We have all these bills we swear we're going to pay. We have all this stuff we swear we're going to do. As soon as that money touch our hands, as soon as it hit our bank accounts, it goes to places other than where we said it would go. Let's be real. Let's be honest. That's what we're supposed to do here. Think about it. For the first time in history, as a people, African-American people, we had an opportunity to have a solid investor in our businesses and a helping hand in getting our businesses off the ground. Yeah, I'm talking about that good old PPP that everybody was getting. But regardless of if it was the correct way or if you got it by illegitimate means, it was a small business loan that if the right things were done with the money, it could have been a lot of successful Black business owners as a result. But most people did what they wanted to do. They went and got seafood, clothes, cars and rims, jewelry, bling, all that for the gram, for the book. They flexing on vacation as opposed to investing in themselves, investing in their craft, investing in the business. But I wonder how many times came from the PPP. I wonder how many people did good with that. I know a lot of them did. And those that did are probably seeing the return in their life. See, that may have been the test for God to see what you would do if he gave you an abundance. How many can say they did what they were supposed to do with the funds? Let's take the widow's example and do what we're supposed to do with the resources that God blesses us with. The widow did what she was supposed to do. And as a result, she was able to live off the rest of the funds. Same way God allowed the miracle to flow through the oil to the point where it didn't stop flowing into all the vessels before. He kept her bank account flowing the same way. There were more vessels, there'd have been more oil. So let's go out into the neighborhoods, into the schools, into your local places to gather the vessels, take them home, pray over them, and watch God allow your oil to overflow in their lives. And as a result, you and your household gonna be blessed. Let us also remember that as men and women of God, it's important to make sure we have things in place to make our families, let the families know that they're gonna be okay once we leave. Things like a living will, trust funds, life insurance, other measures just to ensure that once we go home to be with the Lord, our families don't have to have the burden of paying our debts, burying us, and all that good stuff. If you think about it, it's really simple. Think about how blessed this widow was. She was able to pay the debts to her creditors and live the rest of her life and her son's life off the rest. If that's not a lesson in abundance, if that's not a lesson in stewardship, if that's not a lesson in how wonderful and great our God is, I don't know what to tell y'all. I hope I help somebody. Hope I open somebody's eyes and give them an idea of how God is trying to move in your life. Till next time, I'm your host, Minister Maurice Barnes, aka Minister Mo, aka Young Peter in the Garden of Gethsemane. It's been real, y'all. Y'all be easy.